Because it is my guilt, I claim you, grievous miracle. Make my chest hurt with regret. Forge your punishment and nail it deep. Shape my guilt once again.
Dark, Dank, Depressing, Desolate, Destitute, Despairing, Deadly, Destructive, Demonic, and damn good. These words are what sum up Blasphemous in a nutshell, none of which work to a fault, but work ultimately to enhance and enrich the terrifying and dangerous world of Blasphemous, akin to the methods used by From Software in their Souls titles. Blasphemous, published by Team 17 and developed by The Game Kitchen, is about as left field as you can expect. Initially, after hearing about the game at one of Nintendo's recent Nintendo Directs, Blasphemous instantly reminded me of two things: Castlevania and Dark Souls. Regardless to say, I was a happy boy when I first saw this game. Gothic surroundings and gory, horror-inspired enemies is my jam, and something I've been missing sorely since Castlevania Order of Ecclesia. Not even the legendary Hollow Knight could scratch my itch for some gothic ghoul slaying, but Blasphemous definitely reaches closer towards finally getting that spot itched. Essentially, you play as a being simply known as the Penitent One, the single sole survivor of a massive massacre that ended up trapping you inside of an infinite death loop. No matter how many times you die, your fate will be standing to oppress and destroy you in the wake of your rebirth. From here, you're tasked with tackling the dark, gruesome secrets of a fantastical, heavily Christian and Catholic-inspired religion that dominates the land of Sistodia, in a quest to rid the country of a horrid curse known only as the Miracle. Across the way you'll meet, and potentially fight, a wide slew of horrific enemies, bosses and NPCs, ranging from the spectral to the ghoulish to the downright disturbing. Esposito, Sign of Abjuration, is a prime example of this, being a fleshy, demonic, almost worm-like being, holding a bloodied, blindfolded, wailing baby, which cries throughout the fight as you slay it and its dominator to the beat of harsh drums, violins, and generally heart-pumping music. It's a disturbing boss, and one that has struck with me throughout my time playing Blasphemous, and is definitely up there with the likes of Beelzebub and Legion, or rather Granfaloon, from Castlevania. Most of the bosses in Blasphemous are assorted into this aesthetic, however, drawing inspiration from classical art and religious scripture, or, in smaller one-on-one fights between two combatants, duking it out with the weight of their desires behind them in epic clashes. Combat, however, helps you to overcome these trials, with you being able to attain new skills and movement abilities throughout the game, as you would in any Metroidvania. One thing I will say is, whilst I felt there was a small lack in move diversity, the moves that are present in the game all feel relatively weighty and unexploitable, unlike in something like Bloodstained, which retained many of Castlevania's successes and faults. It creates a combat system that is easy to pick up and to understand as well, but also prime for mastery, taking what many adored about Hollow Knight and adding a layer of realism and weight to it instead of remaining extremely floaty or unsatisfying due to most hits feeling meaty as hell to connect, slashing your opponents like a mere morsel of meat. Spells also feature in Blasphemous, such as Seguria to your eyes like stars, which increases your attack speed, or Veridales of the Forsaken Hamlet, which fires a variety of projectiles. They're more optional than your base combos, but can definitely help if you're in a pinch. Visually, Blasphemous adopts an odd blend of visual styles that I'm unsure works as well as many believe it does. The game is rendered in pixel art, but makes use of many 3D rotations and very small pixel art movements for even minute details, making it more akin to something like Dead Cells rather than expressly Castlevania or Hollow Knight. The overall colour palette ranges vastly, from dark, dank dungeons to crisp, bright morning sunrises. However, for many of the darker levels, they feel like they're perhaps a bit too dark, similar to Castlevania Circle of the Moon. The animation, sound design and world design reminds me heavily of a Castlevania fan project known as Castlevania The Lacard Chronicles 1 and 2, at least from a glance. Difficulty as well is another key factor of Blasphemous. Whilst a lot of the enemies are very heavily inspired from Castlevania, each of them present unique challenges, especially when it comes to the bosses. Unpredictability is the name of the game here, with many larger bosses having winding, hard to read and wiggling attacks or fast projectiles, and many of the smaller one-to-one boss fights focus mostly on speed or defensive play to counter with quick hard hits. It's a welcome change of pace from games like Time Spinner and Castlevania, where the majority of bosses would have a sort of wind-up animation to predict their attacks, but without the sort of dickishness of something totally unpredictable like Castlevania Circle of the Moon's dragon zombies or the infamous Medusa heads. The environment also plays a huge factor into this, with tricky tight jumps, hard to reach areas and traps galore to ensnare and wreck you, all whilst looking visually blended to maximise the hurt. I can't stress this enough, but play Blasphemous on a large screen with max brightness. I feel like I would have had a far harder time surviving the environment on my Switch on low brightness rather than on my TV. So, given the competition from both the past and the present, what do I think of Blasphemous? Well, it's a weighty, dark game that weighs not only in its combat but also in its aesthetic. Gruesome, nightmarish enemies have haunted my dreams successfully, and the land of Sivstodia is a wonder to explore, if a bit unfair at times. The map size is approximately the size of something like Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow, with some additional tidbits thrown in for good measure, ensuring a decent amount of bang for your buck. Personally, for me, Blasphemous overtakes Hollow Knight as one of my favourite Metroidvanias of the modern indie age, based solely off its combat, theming, and worlds, but falls somewhat short of the amount of sheer variety some of the Castlevania titles offer up. It's definitely the closest competitor to Castlevania, however, just beating out Bloodstained Ritual of the Night in my opinion. I award Blasphemous an 8.5 out of 10.